Welcome to Social Justice Education 101. This video is part of the Backpack for Teachers series on the Social Justice Classroom that is a professional learning offering of the Center for Talent Development. My name is Lindsay Walsukari, and I oversee the Leadership and Service Learning programming offered at CTD through the Civic Education Project. Our topic today is an introduction to social justice education. I'll spend a bit of time talking about our framework and also providing an overview to the social justice education standards that Teaching Tolerance provides us in this area. We'll also talk about some resources for how to become more oriented to social justice in your teaching, what you can be reading, thinking about, or talking about on your teaching teams or within your school to strengthen your learning in this area. Before we dive in, I want to briefly share a bit more about our organization for folks that are new to us. CTD is an educational center based at Northwestern University's School of Education and Social Policy. CTD serves students grades pre-K through 12 with exceptional academic potential, their families, and also educators through programming, advising, professional learning, and consulting services. As I mentioned, I lead the Civic Education Project team. CEP is the team at the center that provides student programming, custom design programs and curriculum, and professional learning in the areas of leadership, service learning, and social justice education. So let's dive in. There are three key components to social justice education as we think about it at CEP. First, we're thinking about this as an approach or a framework to teaching and education. We're not necessarily talking about a standardized curriculum across subjects, but rather a way of approaching curriculum development, classroom teaching, and more broadly, policies that govern our schools and education system that work to ensure inclusion and an anti-bias orientation. You'll see in the detail here, we're also talking about celebrating the identities of our students, as well as looking at our own biases and prejudices as classroom teachers and administrators. Second, we're noting that this is an integrated approach. How are our classroom and school policies supporting access and justice for all students and families on multiple levels? You'll see the examples here range from how we're assessing students to how we're building community in our classrooms and in our schools to our approach to managing discipline. Finally, we're talking about skill building. So promoting critical thinking skills, reflection, what's working and what's not, and then pairing that reflection with action to help us make change when it's needed. This is a really big and broad framework, I'm sure you're noticing, and that's intentional. It's meant to encompass a lot of initiatives and approaches. Let's dig into a specific example of a framework. The social justice standards are a set of learning standards that were developed by Teaching Tolerance. Teaching Tolerance is an initiative of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and their mission is to help teachers and schools educate children and youth to be active participants in a diverse democracy. If you're new to Teaching Tolerance, I would encourage you to check them out on the web and social media. They have a lot of free resources for educators, one of which being the social justice education standards. The standards are broken into 4 anchor domains, which are listed here: identity, diversity, justice, and action. Teaching Tolerance calls them, quote, a roadmap for anti-bias education at every stage of K-12 instruction. There are learning outcomes within the standards, broken down by grade band. And as part of CTD's Backpack for Teachers series, you have access to curriculum mini units to accompany these standards that our team has curated for grades 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. So for each standard, you'll receive an outline containing an instructional resource, an activity, and an assignment. Along with the curriculum mini units, the series has resources for educators as well. So we've pulled together a menu of resources and activities for personal reflection and learning, intended to be for individual use, and also a menu of offerings for a group or a staff team that they can participate in together for professional learning purposes. There are additional topics or skills in this area that your team is looking to acquire. Please feel free to get in touch with us. Our team creates custom design, learning, and curriculum in this area, and we'd be happy to learn more about what you're looking to offer. Some important notes and caveats before we wrap up. First, when selecting curriculum and professional learning resources, please ensure you're choosing source material that represents a variety of voices and perspectives. In particular, it's vitally important to choose sources that are authored and selected by Black, Indigenous educators and scholars of color. I would recommend indexing the authors of the material that you're choosing and ensuring these voices are represented. Second, scaffolding curriculum material is crucial. This allows us to address the argument that some raise, stating students can't or shouldn't be learning this material, or they aren't ready to wrestle with these issues. Students are ready. We as the adults are not always ready or feeling prepared. It's very possible to have developmentally appropriate conversations with students on these sorts of topics. And this is in part why we've selected Teaching Tolerance's social justice standards as a starting place for the resources that we've offered in this series. Moving through the anchor domains in order, starting with identity, moving to diversity, justice, and then action, allows students to move from the personal to the broader structural and political arenas. Third, it's imperative to provide the space for students to reflect on this material. The other on-demand webinar in this series is titled The Reflective Classroom, and we take a deeper dive into what reflection is and ways to foster it in that presentation. Finally, as you're planning a lesson or activity, I would encourage you to think about which parts of that lesson need to be taught and which are conversations or activities where a facilitated dialogue is what's called for. I think this can be a particularly key point for teachers when thinking about this type of curriculum, as many of us may not dive into these lessons, in part because we don't consider ourselves to be experts or even proficient in these subject areas. That's okay. This will be a learning process for you as it is for your students, and often what students need most is the time and the space, along with some foundational knowledge to discuss these issues. I'll leave you with this quote from writer and civil rights activist Audre Lorde, who says, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." I think that this can be important for us to keep in mind as educators as we consider ways to make our classrooms and our schools more just, inclusive, and equitable. Thank you so much for joining us. Our website is here if you'd like to learn more, as well as a link to sign up for an educator email digest on the topics of leadership, service learning, and social justice education.